So far, we've already talked about ERDs and relational schemas. So at this point, you should be able to start your practice based on the practice problems that I've already provided you guys with. There are quite a lot of practice problems for ERD and a couple of practice problems for relational schema design as well. Please, please, please make sure that you sit with the lecture topics tonight. Go through the lecture topics and start practicing, trying out those problems as soon as you can. You should get to that as soon as you can because you don't have a lot of time left. Moving forward, we're going to explore the next and final topic for our midterm syllabus, which is normalization techniques. Right? Before that, however, I would like to show you guys something that I haven't showed you so far. Right. So we were going through the ERD data model design and all that. So we saw how to draw an ERD, but we didn't see actually any tools. So the tool that we have used so far, what was the name again? Draw.io, right? Yeah. So you can use the same tool. If you want, you can use a different tool as well. You can use Visual Basic. You can use any other tool, let's say, dedicated for that end for creating an ERD. That's fine as well. However, since Draw.io is there, we're just going to show it using Draw.io because we've already seen how to use Draw.io, and also this is openly accessible to everyone from anywhere, right? So that's why, AJ, you've got entity relationship diagram here already. And if you want specific many different types of entity relationship diagrams and some options to choose from, basically, you can go for, I think it was software maybe? Yeah, software. So here you've got many different options that you can use, all right? So the database ones are your entity relationship diagram templates. So you can use this one or this one, so on and so forth, all right? So let's say we go with this one, right? Database 3 or maybe this one. Yeah, this is entity relationship. So let's go with this one, okay? So once again, you go to the software tab here on the left panel, and then right in the second last row, you will see that there is one template dedicated for entity relationship. So you can just select that, and you will have your sample prepared in front of you. There you go, that's your sample. And you fill it up with the names of your entities and so on and so forth. Let's say, for example, if we have student here, our primary key will be what? Student ID. This part here, this PK, is not mandatory. You don't need to use this PK term to denote the primary key. If now thake, that's fine. That's completely fine. But this part is mandatory, however. Bold and underline. It's mandatory. PK we don't really care, right? And then let's say, for example, we'll have student name. First name, last name, of course, you cannot do it that way. Actually, we'll have to write first name, last name like that. So let's just do it that way. And then let's say email, if it's whatever, you can do it that way. And let's say they have CGPA, which is a derived attribute. And then let's say so a student, let's say, registers for a course. ঠিক আছে, কোর্সের বাকি যা যা এন্টিটি আছে সবকিছু আমি এখানে দিয়ে দিলাম। এখন আমার স্টুডেন্টের সাথে আমি কোর্সে একটা রিলেশনশিপ দিতে চাচ্ছি, ঠিক আছে? সো আই ড্র দিস লাইন। হাউ ডু আই ড্র দিস লাইন? ফার্স্ট অফ অল, এই যে এখান থেকে এভাবে লাইন আনতে পারো, or just what you do is basically just drag your cursor through here and make the connection. Or what you can do is On the left hand side, you will see a lot of lines that are present there, right? এখান থেকে কোনো একটা line নিয়ে আসলেও চলে, ঠিক আছে? You can just bring a line from here as well. Whatever you want. Anyway, make that connection. Establish that connection. And then the line end and line start you can change. Let's say, for example, a student registers for multiple courses. Yeah. So that is not the notation that we follow for relationship lines. We need to represent the cardinalities, right? So a student, let's say, may register for multiple courses. So instead of this arrow, if a student may register for multiple courses, what is the symbol that we will have, guys? A student যদি multiple
circular,
circular
hollow,
and
hollow circle, and hollow cross foot.
that's right. Okay, so right then, so here right at the end, there you go, this one. Okay. And then a course will have one or more students. For that one, what will we use?
Mandatory one to many, as in like so one bar and
Not
cross.
mandatory one to many. That's a separate cardinality on its own completely.
Okay.
It's mandatory many. ঠিক আছে? Not mandatory one to many. It's on this side. If
That's
a
right.
course,
Yeah.
mandatory many. That's right.
Mandatory many. Yeah.
So on this side, we will go with this one. See here. Oh, by the way, on the left hand side, here, once we click on the line, once we select the relationship line, you can select which ends to use, which notations to use at the end, on the right end, on the left end, and so on, right? So on the left end, we go with previously it was none. As you can see, previously it was none. And from the list, we can select this one, right there you go. And then if you want to label the relationships, place the label here. It's the registers. And registers for multiple places. And if you want to make a certain entity associative, let's say this one is an associative entity representing a ternary relationship between this entity, and that one. Let's see. So how can we do that? Select this one and make the edges rounded. Select this one here, becomes rounded. There you go. And then the relationship lines as well, you can adjust them, as you can see, as we have done previously from these options. All right, you can change the relationship lines. The ones that are there, you can get rid of them. Here, once again, this part is not mandatory. All right, having this PKF FK1, then PK FK2, we don't need this at all. You don't need to have that at all. Right? As long as if it's a primary key, you have it bold and underlined. As long as it's a composite key, composite attribute, you have it in this way, and so on. That's fine. All right. Let's say, for example, here it's a composite key. Let's say, all right. So instead of doing this, what we can do is, let's say, make it a composite key, right? So then you do it that way. You can do it that way, all right? Or if it's not a composite key, and for the associative attribute, it was actually two different primary keys combined together to make up the composite key, you can do it this way as well, and bring in another rule for that matter. But the PKFK part, you can leave that out if you wanted to. Chaile rakhte paro. If you don't want to, you can leave that out. All right. So go to draw.io, head over to draw.io, select this template, tweak around with it, try and create an ERD using this, because for your project, you would have to create an ERD in this manner. For the project, handwritten or hand-drawn ERDs will not be accepted. All right. So for the project, you must use some sort of tool to create your ERD. কোনো একটা tool use করে ERD-টা বানাতে হবে for your project, all right? For the exam, however, I would highly recommend you not to use a tool if you are not experienced enough. এক্সামের জন্য আমি রেকমেন্ড করব ইউজ জাস্ট সাবমিট আ হ্যান্ড drawn ERD, ঠিক আছে, হ্যান্ড drawn ERD
ম্যাম,
সাবমিট করো, দ্যাট
সাপোজ
উইল
আমি
বি
এক
বেটার।
পেজে শুরু করলাম, পেজে শেষ হলো না, সেই ক্ষেত্রে কি করতে পারি?
এক পেজে যে শেষ করতে হবে, করতে পারো। তখন যেটা অনেকেই করে, যেটা যে অনেক বড় হয়ে গেলে তখন হচ্ছে গিয়ে ধরো একটা খাতা দুটা পেজে মানে হরাইজন্টালি পুরা মানে কন্টিনিউ করে, বাট ইউজুয়ালি ইট ডাজন্ট টেক মোর দ্যান দ্যাট। একটা পেজে ইউজুয়ালি শেষ করতে পারা উচিত একটা ERD ড্র করাটা। বাট যদি একান্তই সম্ভব না হয় তখন হচ্ছে গিয়ে জাস্ট লে আউট দ্য 2 pages টুগেদার এন্ড দেন পাশাপাশি দুটো পেজ রাখবা। বুঝাতে পেরেছি কি? দুটো A4
ইয়েস
ধরো
ম্যাম, ইয়েস
পাশাপাশি
ম্যাম।
রাখো, ইউ ক্যান ডু ইট দ্যাট, রাইট? এইভাবে করে কানেকশনটা দেখালা বা সামথিং লাইক দ্যাট। ইউজুয়ালি এটা করা লাগে না। আই হ্যাভেন্ট সিন cases like that at least in the past 3 semesters. তার আগে maybe, but not in the past 3 semesters. Usually people are able to draw the ERD within a single page. Anyway, but if you need to, you can always do that for sure. Acha, so moving on to our main topic of this lecture, normalization. Okay, why normalization? Because it's not necessarily going to be the case that you will work with a data model where the techniques of ERD and relational data uh, design have been applied, all right? That is relational data model now hote pare. Let's say, for example, you're working with a data model, an existing data model, by the way, which is not relational. And you need to remove the anomalies. Remember the anomalies that we talked about in brief in the last session, in the last week. The insert anomalies, deletion anomalies, and so on, update anomalies. এই ধরনের anomalies থাকতে পারে if it's not a relational data. How to get rid of those anomalies? তাহলে কি আমি আবার from scratch ERD বানাবো, তারপর relational data design, relational schema design করবো, and so on? Not necessarily. In those cases, those are the cases actually where we most need the technique of normalization. Other than that, also, if we already have a data model which has been prepared by applying the techniques of ERD and then converting the ERD to a relational schema design, even there we can apply the techniques of normalization to make sure that the integrity rules are being maintained. That is, there are no anomalies. So লজিক্যাল ডাটাবেস ডিজাইন যদি আমার অলরেডি থাকে, ওটার উপরে নরমালাইজেশনের টেকনিক আমরা অ্যাপ্লাই করতে পারি টু কনফার্ম, টু চেক দ্যাট all rules are being followed, no anomalies are there. However, if it's an older system, there truly you would need the technique of normalization fervently in order to make sure that the orthodox way of organizing the data or maintaining the data, you break that down and transform the tables or the relations into smaller relations which are devoid of anomalies, right? So basically normalization is the process where we get rid of anomalies. We break down relations, we decompose relations, make smaller, simpler relations which are rid of anomalies, all right? No insert or delete or update anomalies will be there. So that is the technique of normalization. That is what we do in normalization. Simply relation bhangbo, choto korbo, we will get rid of the anomalies. So a normal form in that case would be a relation in such a state that no anomalies are present, basically, and certain rules for the normal form regarding relationships between attributes this time, attributes are followed, all right? So প্রত্যেকটা নরমাল ফর্ম তোমরা দেখবে আমরা নরমালাইজেশনের প্রসেসে মাল্টিপল নরমাল ফর্ম আছে, মাল্টিপল স্টেজেস আছে নরমালাইজেশন। তো প্রত্যেকটা ফর্মেরই কিছু রুলস আছে। Rules regarding what? Regarding relationships between attributes. So far, we haven't done anything. We haven't talked about relationships within attributes at all. So, some rules regarding relationships between attributes must be followed. এই রিলেশনশিপ গুলোকে আমরা কি বলি? অ্যাট্রিবিউট থেকে একটা অ্যাট্রিবিউট থেকে আরেকটা অ্যাট্রিবিউটের রিলেশনশিপ গুলোকে আমরা কিভাবে রিপ্রেজেন্ট করি? We represent them in terms of functional dependencies and determinants. You will quickly see. So, কিছু রুলস আছে প্রত্যেকটা নরমাল ফর্মে, যে রুলগুলো আমাদের মেইনটেইন করতে হবে। If we follow those rules, if the rules are satisfied, then we are in that normal form. And by going through the rules or by establishing the rules for each normal form one by one, step by step, we go through the process of normalization. All right. So, এই যে রিলেশনশিপটা নিয়ে একটু কথা বলি. What is this relationship? We represent this relationship in terms of functional dependencies, determinants, and dependence. All right. So, what is functional dependency then? It's a relationship or a constraint between two attributes where the value of one attribute can be determined based on the value of another. That is, if you know the value of one attribute, then there can be only and only one value for the other attribute. That is, you can determine the other attribute based on the value of one attribute. So, যে অ্যাট্রিবিউটটার ভ্যালুটা ইউজ করে অন্য একটা অ্যাট্রিবিউটের ভ্যালুটা আমরা বের করব, ওই অ্যাট্রিবিউটটাকে আমরা ডিটারমিনেন্ট করছি. So, in a functional dependency, one attribute will be a determinant. Let's say, for example, the other attribute will be the dependent. Determinant এর উপরে we will have an attribute dependent. How so? That is, one attribute can be determined from the value of another, specifically from the determinant. So how we represent functional dependency is in this manner. Let's say, for example, A is an attribute, B is another attribute. We use this arrow to show the functional dependency between the two. Between A and B, between these two attributes, there is a functional dependency. How do we know that? Based on this arrow. Between the attribute A and B, there is this arrow. To the left-hand side, we always place the determinant. So here in this functional dependency, A is the determinant. And what do we mean by that? It means that if you know the value of A, from that value, you can find out or identify B. If you know the value of A, for that value, there can be only one value of B. Hence, from A's value, you can determine the value of B. This is not any mathematical calculation. It has nothing to do with any mathematical calculation or any algebraic calculation, all right? This is directly to do with the idea, let's say, for example, of a primary key. Say here, look at the employee-one relation. The figure at the top, the employee-one relation. Which one is the primary key in the employee-one relation, guys?
Employee ID.
Emp ID. Emp ID is the primary key, that's right. What does that mean? If you know the value of emp ID, what does that mean? You can find out the value of name, department name, salary. Employee ID value যদি আমি জানি, ওই ভ্যালু থেকে কি আমি এমপ্লয়ি নেম, ডিপার্টমেন্ট আর স্যালারি, এই এমপ্লয়িটার নেম, ডিপার্টমেন্ট আর স্যালারি আমরা বের করতে পারবো না?
Yes, miss.
Yes, ma'am.
That is functional dependency, as simple as that. It means that the attributes name, department name, salary, these three attributes are functionally dependent on the determinant emp ID. Emp ID is the determinant here. Emp ID is the determinant here. Name, dep name, salary, these are functionally dependent on emp ID. And in the functional dependency, we place the determinant always on the left, always at the origin of the arrow. And the attribute to the right of the arrow is the one that is functionally dependent on the determinant. Okay? So here you go. Take a look at the arrows. These arrows, they don't have anything to do with referential integrity. In fact, you won't have to use these arrows at all. এটা এখানে দেখানো হচ্ছে just to give you an idea of the functional dependency. এই অ্যারোগুলোর সাথে referential integrity কোনো সম্পর্ক নেই. Once again, you're not going to have to use these arrows at all in your relational schema design or normalization or anything like that. এটা এখানে দেখানো হচ্ছে just তোমাদেরকে বোঝানোর জন্য functional dependencyটা. The fact that emp ID is the determinant and name, dep name, salary, these are, as you can see, to the right of the arrow. So they are functionally dependent on the determinant emp ID, which is to the left of the arrow. Right? That is what we mean by functional dependency. If you know the value of one attribute, from that value you can determine the values of the other attributes. For a value of emp ID, there can be only one name, only one dep name, only one salary. একটা এমপ্লয়ার আইডি 4434 এর জন্য একটাই নেম থাকবে, একটাই ডেপ নেম, একটাই স্যালারি থাকবে। আর এই ভ্যালুগুলো 4434 থেকে আমরা বের করতে পারি, ট্র্যাক করতে পারি। Alright? That's what we mean by functional dependency. In the second example here, take a look. In the second example, the second relation, employee 2. Which one is the primary key?
EMPID and course title.
Course title.
That's right. The two of them combined together makes up the composite primary key of employee 2. Right? However, functional dependency বিষয়টা একটু different. Look at the arrows. All right? Once again, not something that you're going to have to use at all. এখানে just বুঝানোর জন্য arrow গুলো দেওয়া হয়েছে। Therefore, employee course title together they make up the composite primary key. But name, date name, salary, these three attributes are functionally dependent only on who? Only on employee.
Employee ID.
That's right. দেখো এই arrow গুলার left এ employee and right এ we have name, date name, salary. That is এই তিনটে attribute functionally dependent on employee. That is if you know the employee, from that employee you can determine the value of name, date name, salary. Only for date completed, only in order to determine the value of date completed, you need both employee and course title. So employee and course title, these two combined together are the determinants which determine the value of date completed. That is, date completed is functionally dependent on the combination of employee and course title. Combination of employee and course title is the determinant which determines the value of date completed. To the right, we have date completed, which is functionally dependent on the determinant. To the left, which we have MID and course title combination. All right. So if you know both of these, from that you can find out the value of date completed. Right. That's functional dependency. Now, the idea of a candidate key. What is a candidate key? A candidate key is such an attribute which has all the qualities to be a primary key. We don't know yet whether it's a primary key or not. হতেও পারে, নাও হতে পারে. But it has the criteria to be a primary key. All right? And what is a primary key? An attribute or a combination of attributes which can uniquely identify every single instance of a relation or every single row of a table. Okay. So now what are the criteria that it must fulfill specifically? Unique identification, most importantly, and non-redundancy. These two are the most important criteria that it must fulfill: unique identification and non-redundancy. We already know about unique identification, that the candidate key, which by definition has the criteria of a primary key, must be able to uniquely identify every single row of a table. If there is a certain value, a certain specific value of the key, it must refer to one row and only one row in the entire table. In other words, every single non-key of a relation, every single non-key attribute, every single attribute which are not keys in a relation are functionally dependent on the candidate key. And non-redundancy, another thing that you guys must remember, যে জায়গাটায় অনেকেই ভুল করে, the candidate key must be such that no attribute in the key can be deleted without destroying the property of unique identification. What does that mean? It means here, for example, why is MID the primary key? Because it can uniquely identify every single row of the employee relation or the employee table. That is, if we know a certain value of MID, MID একটা value যদি পাই, ওই value একটা single row কে represent করবে uniquely. All right? গেল ভালো কথা. What if we combine MID and name together? What's wrong with that? Would it not be able to uniquely identify the rows? It would still be able to do that. No? MID and name combined করবে.
Yes.
It would still be able to uniquely identify the rows of the table. Then why did we not do that? So that we don't violate this rule, non-redundancy. Because will it be enough if it's MID alone? Yes. And if that's the answer, in that case, you should never bring in attributes which don't need to be there. এখানের মধ্যে MID এর সাথে যদি আমি name combine করতাম, still it would be able to uniquely identify the rows. সাথে যদি আমি date name combine করতাম, still the primary key would be able to uniquely identify the rows. Then why did we not do that? Because of the rule of non-redundancy. Because প্রাইমারি কিতে এমন কোনো কিছু আনতে পারবো না, এমন কোনো অ্যাট্রিবিউট আনতে পারবো না যে অ্যাট্রিবিউট ওখানে থাকা না থাকা means the same thing. All right, even if you make name a part of the primary key, it will still uniquely identify the rows, sure, but if name is not there, will it make a difference? No. Name ওখানে থাকুক বা না থাকুক, it doesn't make any difference. Emp id alone is enough to uniquely identify all the rows. That's why we did not make name a part of the primary. That is, you cannot have any attribute in a primary key which do not make a difference. That is, এখানে যদি name আমি রাখি বা না রাখি, unique identification will still happen. Whether, regardless of whether you keep name here as a part of the primary key or not, unique identification will still happen. That's why name is not a part of the primary key at all. Here, for example, why can we not make emp id alone the primary key? Course title বাদ দিয়ে শুধুমাত্র emp id কে primary key কেন বানাতে পারছি? Why not? Because of date completed. Because here, if we were to get rid of course title যদি বাদ দিতাম তাহলে unique identification হতো না. Because when an employee completes multiple courses on certain dates, what happens then? একটা এমপ্লয়ি যদি মাল্টিপল কোর্স কমপ্লিট করে, in that case multiple রোতে একই এমপ্লয়ির আইডি থাকবে in this table. Let's say an employee completes multiple courses. In this table, multiple rows will have the same employee ID. So if you delete course title from the primary key, course title যদি primary key part না বানায়, if it's there as a regular attribute, then the property of unique identification is destroyed. So we cannot do that. Same goes for emp id as well. If we get rid of emp id from the primary key, if we make only course title the primary key, in that case, what's the problem? The property of unique identification is destroyed because course title alone cannot uniquely identify all the rows. There could be multiple employees doing the same course. একটা single course যদি multiple employee করে, then in multiple rows you'll have the same course title, and hence it's not going to be unique anymore. The property of unique identification is destroyed. However, what if we make the primary key by combining emp id, course title, date completed? What's wrong with that? Date completed. If we make date completed a part of the primary key, will it destroy the property of unique identification? No. But will it make any difference? No. Date completed, regardless of whether it's a part of the primary key or not, unique identification will still happen. That is, date completed ওখানে থাকা না থাকা, it doesn't make any difference. Even if date completed is not there, emp id and course title, this combination will still be able to uniquely identify all the rows. So making date completed a part of the primary key is redundant. So keep that in mind when you apply the techniques of normalization. Don't make those attributes a part of the primary key which do not need to be there. And when it comes to unique identification, always remember your candidate key must be such that every single non-key attribute should be dependent, functionally dependent on the candidate key. All right. Okay. Then moving on. The steps in normalization, as we've discussed, there are many different steps in normalization, as you can see here. First of all, first and foremost, we need to represent the data in terms of a table, right? In terms of a table. That table may have multi-valued attributes. And if it does, in the first step, we get rid of the multi-valued attributes and we select primary keys and we get the first normal form. Then we remove partial dependencies, then we get to the second normal form. So that is the rule for going to the second normal form. This is the prerogative for moving on to the first normal form. This is the requirement for going to the second normal form. And then you remove transitive dependencies, go to the third normal form. And then some more rules to go to the voice code normal form. And then you've got other forms after that as well. But for this course, we will stick until voice code normal form because there are problems with relations which are over normalized. There is such a thing. as normalizing too much. Alright, অনেক বেশি normalize করলে পরে গিয়ে আমাদের data processing speed কমে যাবে. You will see these things as we go on, as we go into the topic of SQL. You will see how these things work. So that's why we actually cannot do as we wish. Alright, and even in normalization we have to do it within a limit. Alright, so only until busy enough we'll discuss in this course, but we'll start with that in the next session, since we are already the time is already up, and I have another class coming up. So we'll talk about the rest of the topics day after tomorrow. All right, in day after tomorrow's session. Also, by the way, we will have a tutorial session. All right, among these days, within these days. I believe that a tutorial session is something that you guys need for your midterm exam preparation. No?
Yes, miss.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so আমি একটা common time দিয়ে দিব. You guys let me know whether you have an issue with that time or not. Uh, Regardless, until a certain point, I'll try to adjust everyone's schedule, but at a certain point পরে আসলে সম্ভব হয় না. Anyway, tutorial session recording will still be there, but try to attend. I can promise that it will help a lot with your midterm exam preparation, because we'll be solving cases there. All right? Okay, that's all for today. Thank you very much. Let's end the session here, and I'll see you guys day after tomorrow. Thank you very much.
Assalamu alaikum.
Welcome.
Assalamu alaikum.